So now that the frames are built, it's time to build the strongback. The strongback is basically just a big plywood box, and when I'm building simple plywood boxes, I love to use pocket hole screws. But if you've used a Craig pocket hole clamp-on jig, you know how miserable you'll be because your hands will be wrecked from using it. So I've built enough shop cabinets and drawers and stuff that I found it useful to build a homemade pocket hole jig. So that's what you're seeing here. There's a drill in the back of it that's on a sled. And I didn't come up with this idea. Years and years ago I saw a YouTube guy, somewhere in Canada I think it was, who had a whole bunch of creative pocket hole machines in his shop for building cabinets. And so I kind of adapted some of the ideas that I thought would work for me. And I've built a couple before I got to these ones you see here. There's one that I'm working on and one to the right of the screen. But they're very convenient for quickly making pocket holes, and lots of them. So that's what this strongback is put together using, is a lot of pocket hole screws. You can see the little clamp action, and then the drill comes down. These spacers I'm clamping on, their purpose is to hold the pieces in place while I'm putting the pocket hole screws in. Pocket hole screws are convenient, but they tend to make everything slide around. So as you put them in on an angle, they drag the workpiece sideways, so you need some way to back it up. So that's all those clamps are for, is to just temporarily hold it in place. Okay, so tonight I just want to show you some progress on the strongback. I'm not going to go too crazy explaining this because it's just a plywood box, but there are a few interesting things. So first of all, this is in my basement, and this strongback came in earlier today through this window. And that's an important thing to consider when you're building in your basement is, are you going to be able to get the canoe back out when it's done? And this went in relatively easily, so I think it will. So once the box beam was down here, I put some legs on it, which was pretty easy, and then it has to be leveled. So I started in the middle. The middle leg is slightly taller than the ends because the ends have leveling feet on them. So I leveled the middle, and then I worked my way out to the ends. So I've got the whole box beam basically level longitudinally and transversely. Then the next thing I did is mark the center on either end. And then once you have the center on either end, you can use a chalk line, some fishing line. I used a laser level, as you can see here. Anything that will give you a straight line all the way down the middle. It's not necessarily great to measure off the edge because the edge is wavy. On mine, the edge to center varies up to almost a quarter inch. So I put the laser level on there, mark down the middle, and then use a straight edge to connect it. So when I turn the laser level off, you can see I have a nice pencil line down the middle. So now that I have the box beam set up down here, I can put all these nice frames on it, so that'll be what's coming next. So my helpful tip for laying out the strongback frames is, you might not be able to see it, but the designer references off of midships, and then everything's a foot from that. So what I did is laid out my midships station marks and then stretched out the whole tape measure all the way down so that all the marks will be referenced off of one point. And this is opposed to taking the tape measure, measuring out the next one, marking it, measuring out the next one and marking it, and so on, because then every time I make a little error, that gets transferred into all the subsequent measurements. So this one I could make an error on one measurement. I could be off by a 32nd or something on 1 foot, but it would have no effect on my measurements down there. So that's my little helpful tip using bean cans. So check this strong back for level. I happen to have a laser level, so that's convenient for me to use. So what I do is I set the laser level at a convenient height. It doesn't matter what it is. I put it at the middle of the strong back, and I'm marking the line on here, the width of the laser line. And then I just move down the strong back, so I come down to this end. And I've already been working on this quite a bit, so it's level right now. It's between the marks. Then I come down to this end, check it. So right now it's nice and straight. That took quite a bit of tweaking. So the legs in the middle of the strong back, I have a fixed leg, and then on the ends I have adjustable legs, so I can move it up and down. So I've been working on that, and I can move it to twist it and untwist it. So I've been working to get it all nice and flat as I can. So now that I've got the strong back leveled, I've got the twist out of it, and the adjustable feet have served their purpose, I'm going to lock it down by nailing these to the feet so that it's sitting right where I want it and can't move anymore. The thing that's odd is I've been working on this for a couple nights, and the first night when I built it rough, I got it pretty much level. Last night I came down and I got the twist out of it and got it level. And then tonight I came down and I had to tweak it again. So it keeps changing a little bit. So I'm hoping that stops once I nail all the feet down. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I decided to give it a try with just hot glue and see how that goes. So this is some 3M hot glue. It's pretty sturdy stuff. Hopefully this gives me enough that it won't ever slide around while I'm building it. Okay, so I wanted to show you these frames. It's starting to look a little bit like a boat skeleton, which is pretty cool. I started by putting down these cleats for each frame. Got them nice and square. Then I toe nailed all the frames into those with 2 nails in case I had to change it. And then I checked it with the laser level, which is a kind of neat thing to be able to use. And it turned out that all the effort I put into leveling and tuning the strongback paid off, because it's all lined up about as close as I could hope to get it. And the ones that are off to the point where I don't think I could shim it and get it any better. So I'm gonna roll with it. I'm about to cut out the bow and stern profiles, and I wanted to talk about them a little bit because they were a little confusing to me. It took me a little bit to wrap my head around how to do this. The designer provided the outer profile of the boat, which is this outer line. And since I want to use this as a racing canoe, I need to adhere to that line really carefully. And he also provided a line for your frame if you wanted to make or for your stem mold, if you wanted to make a stemless canoe. So if you wanted no stem in there, you just wanted the planks to meet at the bow. Well, I wanted to put an ash stem in these just for extra strength and collision insurance. So that option wasn't laid out on here. So it took me a little while to figure out what to do. So I decided finally to work back from the outer profile. It's going to probably seem obvious to you when you see it now, but it took me a while to figure this out. So up here, this is the outside of the plank, and this is the inside of the plank, the second line. And I measured back that 1/4 inch there, and then I measured back 3/4 of an inch here, because that's how much outer stem I want. And then I just kind of carried this up at 3/4 in for the vertical part of the bow, or the near vertical part. And then I took a flexible plastic batten, put some nails in here, some nails up here, and just kind of pushed it until I had a fair curve through here for this second line. And I just made sure it was tapering so that it didn't get larger and then smaller again as I went. So it continues to get larger until it's all the way out to the full 3/4. So once I had set the inside of the outer stem, then I just needed to measure a consistent 3/4 of an inch for the inner stem. So I just went along with a ruler and measured 3/4 of an inch all through here. Then I put in more nails, flexed the batten through there, connected them all with a smooth curve. So now I can cut this line here. That'll be the plywood mold. And then I can bend the ash around this. And I'm going to also cut the inside of this outer line here. And I'm going to keep this outer piece as a template that I can hold up to my canoe to check it, to make sure I'm following the profile. I really want to get this shape correct. So that was what I figured out how to do. Hopefully that helps you a little bit, depending on what you get from the designer. In another canoe, I wouldn't have worried about it very much, because I wouldn't care if it was 18 feet 7 inches or 18 feet 5 inches, but for this canoe, it's got to be 18 feet 6 inches or less. It cannot be more than that. So that's what I did. Our makeshift steam box is a PVC pipe on top of a tea kettle that's on an induction burner. It's really amazing how bendy ash hardwood can become when you steam it. So it goes in the steam box for a while. I forget how long, but when you take it out, it's like a noodle, and you can bend it around the form super easily. And then when it cools and dries, it pretty much holds the shape. You leave it on the forms for a while and it re-solidifies into that shape. And then from there, you can glue it up later, which we'll do. So now it's time to glue up the stem pieces. So they've cooled and solidified, so they've taken their new shape. They do spring back a little bit, but they are pretty easy to put back on the forms. So the forms have been set up across the shop. You can see that the inner stems have already been bent around them and epoxy glued up. And there's a piece of wax paper on there to keep these outer stems from gluing to the inner stems. And so the inner stems become the form for the outer stems. And right now I'm just pre-wetting all the ash strips with epoxy, and then they'll get thickened epoxy spread on them. I like to put the thin epoxy, the regular epoxy on there first, just so the wood can soak up any epoxy if it wants to and it doesn't suck it out of the thickened epoxy. And then the thickened epoxy gets spread on there like peanut butter, and then they get glued up and clamped. And you don't need a ton of pressure for this because the epoxy doesn't need pressure to do its thing, but you just need enough to hold it on there. But you don't want to go too tight or it'll all squeeze out, and then you'll have a starved joint. And then that cures for a day or so, and you have some serious overkill stems. You could probably get away with just gluing these, but I figure I'm only building one of these canoes, so I might as well use epoxy for everything. So this is a view of the strongback with the frames and stems on it just before I start planking it. And you can see I've already sanded back the stem so that it has a little flat on the front edge where the planks will land. I sanded that using a little 1-inch wide Makita band or belt file, and that thing's really effective for boat building. So the stem, the inner stem is on there. It's got a screw in the end of it. It's been tapered to a point. So up here, it's not been shaped, but down here where I'm going to start planking, I have shaped it. I used a strip to use as a batten to make sure I was on the right track so it lands flat on there. There's a little screw holding it below the shear so it extends beyond the shear. I put packing tape on all the edges of the frame so they don't get glue stuck to them as badly. And we're just walking aft here. You can see the battens I used. Here's the aft stem. It's marked on top. It hasn't been shaped on top yet, but I have shaped it down below. You just need to stay a few strips ahead of where you're planking. Otherwise, it's pretty hard to shape the stem. So I've got it shaped up to the vertical section, which is pretty easy on this canoe to do. can see my wife's canoe in the background. That's a wee lassie. She's got her frame set up as well. So it's a little bit fiddly to do this. Oh, that's the belt sander I use. That thing's super handy. So if you want to know where the 4-inch water line is later in the process, after you put the planking on, the easiest way I could think of to do it was to mark it on the walls of the room so that I could set the laser level back up later. So much later in the process, I can check the outside width of the boat at a certain water line to make sure it complies with the race specs for this boat. So that's what the purpose of these laser lines are.